Oh, welcome back everybody to episode 3 of the Island 12 series for Planet Coaster. Hope everyone's having a good day. Yesterday, of course, we did release the next episode of the concept build series alongside this one. Yesterday, it wasn't actually a build concept for Planet Coaster. It was, of course, the concept design for the character of the Bantam race, which are the little dudes that do reside on this island that we're building today. If you've not heard any of the lore that I have written and that I have been talking about over the last couple of weeks for them guys, then I would recommend you go watching episode 2 of the concept build series. That explains a lot of the lore for this island. It explains who lives here, why it's here, all that kind of stuff. And then the video that I put out yesterday in the concept series is actually me designing the characters themselves. It is a pretty rudimental sketch. It's not anything amazing. It's the first time I kind of did a character design over there. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting video. You should definitely go watch it if you haven't already. At about 2 minutes into this video, there will be a little card that pops out in the top right hand corner of the screen, and you can click up there and that will take you over to the concept series as well. According to the viewers that have been watching both series, the view numbers are about the same for this series and the concept series so far. So a lot of you guys have actually been watching that series alongside this one and seem to be enjoying it, so thank you very much for that. I do appreciate it. One more thing before we start today's episode properly, I just want to say, if you have Twitter, then definitely get on over there and follow me. You can follow me at mot_games, at mot_games over on Twitter. I will be releasing a lot of let's call it sneak peek stuff for upcoming series, this series, the concept one, just like little pictures, all that kind of stuff, and talking to you guys over there about upcoming content and that. So if you have Twitter or you're thinking about getting Twitter, definitely do follow me over on Twitter. My Twitter is actually very small. It's only like 200 people that follow me on Twitter, so I'm trying to grow that a little bit, so come on over to Twitter. It's pretty fun, and we will be having some sneak peek stuff. But in today's episode, we are of course finishing everything off for Island 12 itself, the main island, and we're going to be finishing off pretty much everything. There's a small amount of little things that I want to do. I want to go back in and kind of finish at a later date. But in today's episode, I say we get probably about 98% of this done, and in next week's episode we will be moving on to the next island, which is exciting, because next week you're going to get a new island design on the concept video, and then you're going to get a whole new build in this park for the next island, which is going to be good. And that island we'll be working on for the next 4 weeks, and then of course after that we'll be working on the next island, and that's how this series is going to go throughout the year. So as you can see, we're working on this building here that connects to the big castle, big tower that we worked on in the last episode. Obviously, if you haven't seen the last episode, I would probably recommend you go watch that before this one, because you're not going to have any idea what's going on in today's episode if you haven't seen that. Yeah, definitely go watch that one if you haven't seen that already. But as you can see, we're just working on this extra building. If you remember in the concept art, I will be showing the concept art at the end of the video as well, before the slow-mo footage, because a lot of people wanted to compare the artwork that I've done, the concept work, to the finished product. So there will be not a side-by-side, but you will see the concept before we go into the final slow-mo footage at the end, the cinematic footage, so you can kind of remember what it was I drew and come to a conclusion in your mind, or whether I did a good job of building off of that kind of template, I guess you could call it. So yeah, that's going to be fun. At the end you're going to be able to see that. But if you do remember back to that concept artwork, we did have this kind of like extension building on the side Now all of my angles in that kind of artwork were a little bit wonky, so it looked a little bit strange on the concept work, but obviously here, now that I've built this into place, it fits pretty well actually. I had to make it a little bit smaller than I had planned to, because the island itself was a little bit more cramped than I kind of gave myself space for in the concept work. So that was interesting. I had to come up with a new way of building this little building here, but it's actually a pretty good size once you walk inside. Once you realize that this island is huge. If this island was in real life, this island would be absolutely massive, and this structure that is on top of it is bigger than anything you could ever imagine in your mind. And that's how crazy big. Like this tower here, the big white castle tower that we built last week, that has 150 floors inside it if this was in real life. So that is how big it is. So it may look a little bit small, this building on the side, but that's just, you know, limitations to building fantasy stuff inside Planet Coaster. I physically can't make this any bigger because it's just going to fill up the whole map and then I won't have room for anything else. But yeah, the people that live here are so small that if they walked around this island, it would take them ages to get across it. Obviously they can run and sprint and whatever they do, but you just have to kind of imagine that this is a lot bigger, because perspective is hard. Obviously in this game the only perspective you have is like the size of the trees in the distance, and maybe once the actual guests can start walking in here, they're going to be a certain size. But obviously if those guests were walking through here and they were the same size in real life, then they would be like giants. They would be huge people, because everything is like scaled down hugely, if that makes sense. So yeah, this would be like a massive island if this was to be made in real life, but obviously we just don't have the space to do that, so we have to kind of scale it down a little bit. But yeah, it's fun to have to work around that kind of size issue in this game. We don't have unlimited space. I could have just made each of the 12 islands in their own single map and made them a lot bigger scale, but the problem with that is I wouldn't have been able to go really any much higher with the castle, because you hit the top of the box. Like I physically couldn't build this castle any higher, because we were already way too high. So even if I did one island per map and had 12 separate saves, I wouldn't really have been able to make this castle that much bigger, because unless I dug out the whole ground of this map, I wouldn't have been able to make it any bigger because of the map limitations. So I had thought about all of this kind of stuff before doing this, but I think the scale that I've gone for is fine, because it's easy to get the guests in here, and it's kind of like a miniature scale, if that makes sense. It's massive, it's big, but it's miniature compared to what it would be if like you were walking into this in real life. But that's fine, because this is like a remaking of the place for the Planet Coaster people. Kind of like, let's say Hogwarts is a real place and Universal Studios has made the castle for the guests to go see. This is kind of what that is like, if that makes sense. This is kind of like the come see what, you know, you can't actually get to in real life. So it's obviously a smaller scale than what it would be. But yeah, I like it. I think the scaling's fine, and it works pretty well. So as you can see here, we are working on these gates. These gates were a pain because they hang right over the front side of the mountain, or the island, should I say, right here. So this obviously is just like an extra defense for this little island. I'm saying little island now, it's not a little island at all, it's a big island. It's just an extra defense right here. Obviously we've got the shards over there to the right with the spiral staircase. That obviously is a defense as well, which we haven't really covered yet, explaining what that does exactly. In like a later episode we will explain what those shards over there do defensively. It's very interesting what they do actually, so I'm excited to go into those details, but it's pretty confusing and complex, so we're going to leave that probably for a much later episode where we go over all those details. But yeah, this is just obviously a defensive gate. I kind of based this on real life medieval castles from the UK, with the two side bits. I don't know what they're called, I guess they're like turrets or whatever, and then the double gate, because back in the day they would use a double gate system. So if they broke through the first gate, they would be inside of this like massive building, and then they would be having to smash down the second gate to actually get in. But while they were in the middle, there would be enemies on the outside of the building poking spears through the side. Like there would be little slits in the wall, and they would be shoving spears through the side. So basically it's a trap. Like if you go through the first gate, then you're just gonna get speared to death. So that's kind of what I based this gate on right here, because I thought that was pretty cool to have that, and it fit in well with the rest of the design. And that's pretty much what I drew anyway in the concept work. So I was happy the way that this turned out. There's a few little tweaks that I'm planning on doing to this, because it looks a little bit too squarish, so I'm trying to work out how to kind of make that look a little bit more natural for the island. But yeah, at this point we're just going around putting some extra exterior walls on in some vulnerable places on the island, just for a little bit more of a defensive look. I really want to push the idea that this is the defensive island. This is the island that takes all of the force of an on-tacking or an attacking force if something happens. So we want to make this look like a military base, kind of, you know, a castle. That's what it is. It's there to defend the rest of the valley. So we really have to push that idea visually, so that comes across. If someone's never watched this video and they load up this park, once it's complete, I want it to be crystal clear from the beginning what this island is. And if we make it look defensive, then they're gonna know that this is an island built to defend from something. They obviously won't know from what, but they'll probably know that this is an island that is built to defend stuff. So that's what we wanted to go for. That's why there's loads of exterior walls all over the place, and it just makes the build look really nice at the end of the day. So at this point it was just up to some final details. There is another section that we're going to go do in just a minute, but I just wanted to put a few little bushes around because it was very bushless. That's definitely not a word, but there was no foliage on this island at all, and it looked very, I guess, like just derelict of any sort of life form. So I wanted to put a few little bushes in there. You have to be careful with scale though, because even the smallest of bushes that you place in when the scale is so small, obviously this is a small scale like we spoke about earlier. If you put a tiny bush somewhere, in reality that bush would be massive. So you have to be careful when you're working with a scale that isn't like 1-to-1, what you place down. It's okay for buildings to be massively underscaled because you can scale up buildings really easy, but you're not gonna have like a football field size bush, if that makes sense. So yeah, So in the lore of Island 12, we obviously have the Bantam race. If you haven't heard anything about them, definitely go watch episode 2 of the concept build video. We talk in a lot of detail about the race and why they're on this island. I did also talk a lot about the fact that they actually live under the castle itself. They're so small, they don't live in the castle. The castle's they're just, you know, they built the castle just for defensive purposes. If someone attacked, all the armies from the lands, from the other islands will come to this island to help defend the rest of the valley. And they all fit inside the castle. The armies all fit inside the castle. That's why it was built so big. Just like briefly going over a little bit of the backstory here. But they're really small and they prefer to live under the castle in tunnels. Now in the lore there was thousands of tunnels under here. We don't have doors that are small enough to make that look okay. So I just used big doors, the ones that we had. I just used a few of them. So obviously each door is like a couple of tunnels or something. It splits off into other hundreds of tunnels. That's just like, I wanted to represent the fact that they live under here for anyone that doesn't, you know, if anyone comes down here and they see this, they're like, oh, okay, people live down here. That's what I kind of had to do with these doors, because we don't have miniature scale doors, unfortunately. So that is just what I went for. If there was a way for me to make a little tiny looking door, if I have the time to go back and try and make a little scale door, then I'll do that and I'll replace them and add like hundreds of them all over the place, because that will look better. But for the time being, I just, you know, placed those doors there. Just so anyone that comes down here kind of gets the idea of what's going on. But yeah, they live under here in their thousands of little tunnels. That's where they decide to live. So yeah, this is what this little section is. This is obviously only one of the underground tunnels that leads to the houses of many thousands of little Bantam dudes. There's obviously loads of other tunnels that we haven't built on this island. There's also a escape, I wouldn't say escape hatch, but there's another tunnel that goes from underneath the castle. You'll see it a little bit later in the cinematic footage, and that is like the way that the guests will go to the next island. So the bridge from this island to one of the other islands will be from that tunnel, and you'll see that later in the cinematic footage coming up in just a minute. So yeah, a few little bits of decoration down here. I think I put some stalactites, I can't even say that word right now, stalactites or whatever, right there in the roof. I always remember that tights come down, mites go up, but I forgot how to say that. I think it's oh, I don't know. Anyway, that is pretty much the end of today's video. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it again. If you did, please leave a like, feel free to subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comment section. As you can see, we're going now into the artwork right here. That was the concept build, that was the concept art that I did, and what you're gonna see now is the cinematic footage. So here you go. I will see you guys again next week for a brand new concept video and a build video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.